So, it seems as though something has led you to the campsite of the Orator. Well, as you can see, I've stoked the fire, which means it's time for you to pull up your chair, settle in, because I have another tale to tell. Sometimes, even the most beautiful days pave way to the darkest nights. A group on the island of Mauritius found this out firsthand in 1971. Their day was beautiful. They spent it at the ocean, swimming, catching seafood, and spent their evening eating it and enjoying each other's company. Only for night to fall. Suddenly, they're surrounded by phantoms, voices, screams, and a woman in white. But before we begin, if you found yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand, true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, which is twice a week, every Monday and Friday, both at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Second, of course, all of my stories are true first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. I will make sure to link today's original story below, but if you're or anybody you know has a story and you think it would fit well on my channel, please reach out to me on any of my social media and we'll find a time to get together, collect your story, and potentially one day feature it here on the Orator. And lastly, of course, I do apologize for last week. We had crazy audio issues. I upgraded my phone, which is what I shoot my video on, and my old audio did not sync up with my new phone, and I tried to troubleshoot it, couldn't, and so I have upgraded audio. So all things ended up great, and I appreciate everybody for the patience. And so, with all of that out of the way, let's finally get on to today's story. It is a tale that I call Terror at Flic En Aflac. The year is 1971. Abdul is in his late 20s and he still lives with his parents. They live on the island of Mauritius, which is east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. And of course, it's a beautiful tropical island. They live in the city called Rose Hill, and they just live there and enjoy their time on the island. And one day, Abdul's father comes home from work, and he brings with him two people he met while traveling home. They are backpackers from South Africa, and they're just sort of exploring. They're on the island, enjoying themselves, and, you know, Abdul's father, he's a really nice guy, and so he says, listen, if you're on the island and you want to get a real experience, please, instead of, you know, having to be out in your tents at night, come, stay with me at my home, and you could, you know, eat with my family, and we can show you the culture and the island and everything like that. And so this South African couple, even though, you know, their primary language was Afrikaans and English, and on Mauritius they speak like a Mauritian Creole combo, and so they couldn't really understand each other that well, they were still really excited for it, and so they said, of course, we would love to do that. And so Abdul's father comes home. He's got this white South African couple, and all that Abdul really remembers, he said, you know, it's been a long time now, all the way back in the 70s, he said, the woman, you know, I remember she had blonde hair, but I remember the guy had this big, bushy, blonde beard. And they were super friendly. They came in, they unloaded their packs, and they all talked and hung out for a while. And then Abdul's father said, you know what we should do? If you guys are really looking to explore the island, we should go to Flic En Aflac. And Flic En Aflac, it was this nice beach right on the ocean. And he said, you know, we could go and we could camp out there and we could eat there and you could just have all this awesome experience and we'll help you with everything. And this couple, they're like, they loved this idea. And so that was it. They just decided right then and there, we're changing all of our plans and we're going on this little mini trip. And so they pack everything up into this car. Now, remember, there are now 5 of them in this one tiny car. And so they had to painstakingly pack all of this stuff to make sure they could get everything they wanted to get and that it would fit into this small car. So they took a really long time and made sure that every single thing was in there perfectly. But at the end of all of this, they do. They have everything they need, and they all still somehow fit in the car, and they drive from Rose Hill to Mauritius. Now, it's not that far, right? It's a pretty short car ride, and so eventually, after a little while, they end up at the beach, and they unpack everything, and then they just spend the day doing everything you could think of in the beach. They go swimming in this beautiful water and just enjoy being in the warm ocean. They catch a bunch of fish and seafood, crabs and lobster and shrimp, and they literally go into the ocean and catch this stuff. And then they have this awesome lunch where they're eating some of the seafood and stuff like that and enjoying each other's company. And, this whole time, they're all drinking and having fun. And Abdul says he remembers his father. He started drinking pretty heavily. And so while everybody else is like pleasantly buzzed, he was getting pretty drunk and enjoying himself quite a bit. And so day turns into evening, and it is just one of those perfect days. And so they come out of the ocean, they have this huge bounty of seafood, and they get to cooking it for dinner. And they have this giant barbecue of things that they got in the ocean that day. I mean, it's that fresh. And they're looking up at this sea of stars as the sun is starting to set. And it's just one of those days that Abdul said it couldn't have been more perfect. And so as the sun is setting and they're sitting down enjoying their meal, they're just drawing in the sand to try to communicate, playing charades because they don't speak each other's language very well. And they're just laughing and enjoying their time. And then all of a sudden, right around 9 o'clock, they hear this. It sounds almost like somebody wailing, like this woman wailing, crying, screaming out in the night. But even though it's very clear, it's very distant. It doesn't sound like it's somebody that's around them, but it's like there's nobody else around them, and they're not by the city or anything like that. Now, if you were to look on a map now, Flic En Aflac is pretty developed, and there's a lot of hotels and stuff like that, but in the 1970s, they said, it was pretty sparse. You had the beach itself there, and then there were a couple houses, but mostly the land around it was pretty wild, forests and shrubs and bushes and all that kind of stuff. And so there's no other people around. And they're listening to this wailing sound, and it sounds like a person, but they're trying to talk themselves out of that. They're thinking, well, we don't live right here on the beach, and it could just be any number of sea creatures that we don't know about, or birds, or any of this kind of stuff could be what's making this noise at night, and we're just not familiar with that. And so they're kind of, trying to make sure that they don't freak out too much by this noise. And then all of a sudden, while they're kind of sitting here discussing it, off in the distance, not too far away, only maybe 20, 30 yards away, they see this woman come walking out of the ocean. And this woman, she's in a white dress, like a really nice fancy white dress, not something you would be swimming in the ocean with, certainly. And she literally just comes walking up out of the ocean. Now she's close enough that they all get a very good look at her. She has long black hair. She has this beautiful, white dress on, but she's far enough away that they can't see her face or any of the features or anything like that. And she literally just walks up out of the ocean onto the beach. She doesn't pay any attention to them at all. And then she just walks across the beach and out into the woods. And Abdul, he's looking around like, what the heck? And everybody saw it. And so he jumps up and he runs down the beach to where she was. And he's thinking maybe there's another campsite there, or he's going to find a group of people messing around or something like that. And he runs over there, and there's nothing. There's no lights shining from that direction that would indicate a direction that she went. There are no houses there. I mean, it's literally like she came out of the ocean, which they've been in this area all day, and they have no clue how she could have even gotten there. And then she just enters the woods and disappears into the woods over there. And Abdul, he's like, it was getting late enough and it was freaky enough to where he didn't want to go chasing after her. And so he's just looking out in the woods, and it's completely dark there, and there's nobody there. And so at some point, he's just left to return to the little, fire that they're all sitting around. And he just explains, like, I went over there and there was nothing. And so they're all kind of freaked out, and they're discussing this. And as they're discussing it, they start hearing other noises around them. They hear people. It sounds like people walking around them in the woods, and they can hear the crunching of leaves and stuff like that, and they hear it everywhere around them. And then all of a sudden, they hear this, like, it's almost like the flapping of really big wings. They said they didn't know if it was birds or maybe bats or something like that, but it was like all of a sudden this sea of heavy flapping as these giant creatures take off. And they're looking up in the sky to see if they can see anything, and they don't see anything at all. and they're trying to figure out, what is this and what are these noises, and they're all getting really paranoid and scared as this is happening, except for Abdul's father, who's frankly a little bit too intoxicated to be scared. He's just sort of laughing and thinking that this is all weird. And then all of a sudden, right in the center of their where they're sitting in the beach, there's this giant thud, as if something fell out of the sky and slammed onto the beach right in front of them. It was really loud. It startled all of them. And so they start looking around for whatever could have possibly made this sound. And there's just nothing there. It landed right in front of them. They all heard it. They all felt the impact of it. And there's literally nothing around them. And so they are on, at this point, high alert. And they're looking around and they're trying to see if there's any other people or maybe somebody's messing with them or something. They're trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of this silence, there is this scream, this high-pitched shriek from pretty close nearby. And this is not some wailing off in the distance. This is someone screaming bloody murder right next to them. And so, of course, they jump up and they're freaking out and they're looking all over the place and they can't see anybody. And at this point, they've had enough. Even if this is not something supernatural, which it's seeming like it is, there are definitely people messing around with them at least. And so they decide right away, with this screaming and they don't even know what's going on, they start to pack up. They're getting ready to leave, especially the two women. They start throwing everything into the car. The problem is, remember, there were 5 of them packed into this little car, and so they had to really take their time in packing it to make sure they could get everything in there. And now they're panicked and frantic, and they're shoving stuff into the car. And as they're trying to load stuff into the car, all of a sudden coconuts come flying from out of the dark into their campsite. These things aren't falling from trees, they're getting thrown at them. And so while they're jamming all of this stuff into the car, they're getting hit with coconuts that are coming flying in from the dark. But it's not so dark that they can't see. There's still sunset. They're on the beach. There's enough light for them to look around. And there's nobody there. And so they're shoving everything they can into the car. And Abdul remembers he had to grab the grill that they had just been cooking on. And he's jamming the car and he's like, I burned my hands a bunch of times as I'm shoving it in. But eventually, they finally get everything packed into this car, and the coconuts are still raining down and slamming around them. And Abdul, he jumps into the driver's seat because his dad, who would normally drive, is too drunk. And so Abdul's like, I'm going to get us out of there. And everybody else piles into the car. Abdul puts it in drive, and he starts speeding down this, this little trail that got them to the beach. And almost immediately, he has to slam on the brakes because right in front of them, as he looks out the window, is an impossibility. The headlights are illuminating the woman in white. She's standing right in front of them in the trail. And Abdul and everybody else, they look at each other and they start just screaming because she's right in the way and they can't really get around her. And Abdul is freaking out and he's pretty young and he doesn't know what to do. And so they're all screaming and they're like, go, get out of here, go. And then all of a sudden someone behind him slams into the back of the car like something jumped on their car or fell on their car. And they turn around and they look out the back of the window and there's nothing there. Nobody jumped on their car, nothing fell on their car, there's nobody in the back. He's got the brake lights on and it's illuminating everything behind them in red and there's nothing back there. And so they turn around and he gets ready to leave, and as he turns around he notices that woman in white is finally gone. And so he goes to put it in drive again to get out of there, and then all of a sudden his peripheral vision starts to alert him, and he slowly turns and looks out the window, and there she is, right next to his window, staring in at him with this ghastly expression on his face. And he screams and everybody else screams and he hits the gas and he tries to go, and then all of a sudden his car sputters out and dies. And he's stuck there, and this woman is just staring in at them, and they're all screaming in the car, and Abdul is trying to start the engine over and over and over as this woman stares in at him, and finally the engine turns over and he flies out of there. He flies down the trail, finally hits the main road, and he heads right back towards Rose Hill where they live. And they finally get out of there into the Rose Hill, the city proper, and their car breaks down. And now all of a sudden they're completely stranded. At this point, it's like 11:30 at night, and they're completely stranded. Now, this is all the way back in 1971. No cell phones or anything like that. And so, Abdul's mom and the other lady, the South African lady that they had been, hanging out with, they decide they're just going to walk all the way back to Abdul's home, which is not that far at this point. And from there, they're going to call a friend and get it towed and get it fixed. And sure enough, that's exactly what they do. They go to the house, they call, one of their friends comes out, meets them, tows their car back, and they find out that it's just one of the timing belts on it has broken, and it's a pretty easy repair. And so their friend, he's mechanically inclined, he's happy to fix it. And so, while they're kind of going over, fixing the car, they start to tell their friend this story of all of the weird events that they experienced at Flic En Aflac. And they're talking to him about it, and he says, it's interesting that you say that because I've heard a ton of stories over the years of that area being haunted, and I've specifically heard about a woman in a white dress coming out of the ocean and people running around and hearing their voices and stuff like that. He said, what's really scary is I've even heard stories of people going into like a trance and following that woman into the ocean and disappearing. He's like, I'm not sure how much of that is true. He's like, but I've heard it from enough sources to where, I know that there's something weird going on that beach. And he's like, so I've heard of that before, the woman in white and people running around and all of that different stuff. And so this really freaks them out enough so Abdul decides he wants to do some research. Like, what is going on this beach? And so during the day, he heads back there one day and he's searching around to see if he can find anything. And lo and behold, he walked into the woods right where that woman had come out and walked into the woods by that beach. And he finds this tiny cemetery that is hidden back in the woods, unmarked and completely obscured by the trees and brushes around it. And he just can't believe that they were this close to this area without having any idea. And Abdul, he says, all these years later, he doesn't really hear about things happening on that section, that Flic En Aflac section of the beach. He said now that everything is developed, more and everything like that, he thinks that whatever it was that was haunting that area has finally been put to rest. And so that's going to do it for today's story. If you found yourself enjoying this story or any of the other ones on my channel, first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your plan chat to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, which is twice a week, every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Second, of course, all of my stories are true first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. I'll link today's story below, but if you're anybody you know has a story and you think it would fit well on my channel, reach out to me on any of my social media, and we'll find time to get together, collect your story, and potentially one day feature it here on the Orator. And so, until next time, where you'll pull up your chair, my fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.